Hey guys, tonight we're trudging barefoot through the frost-bitten, hay-strewn world of a medieval serf. Someone who worked from sunup to sundown and probably even dreamed about turnips. You'll wake up in a smoky one-room cottage, share your blanket with 3 siblings and possibly a chicken, and shuffle off to do back-breaking labor for someone richer, fancier, and usually less helpful than a damp sock. If you're expecting nobility, castles, or shiny armor, you're in the wrong part of the village. This isn't the kind of medieval life you see in movies. It's the kind where your bed is made of straw, your boots are an aspiration, and your main source of entertainment is trying to spot rats bigger than your cousin. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is. I love seeing the sleepy little map we build together. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Your day begins before the sun, not because you're ambitious, but because the rooster has absolutely no concept of personal boundaries. It crows like it's auditioning for a solo in the village choir. You groan. You're sore. Everything is sore. Even your dreams were tired. You open your eyes to smoke-stained beams and the faint glimmer of frost clinging to the inside of the shutters. It's cold, so cold that your breath hangs in front of you like a second opinion. You're under a rough wool blanket stuffed with straw, but that doesn't stop the chill from nibbling at your toes. Your siblings are already stirring. There are a lot of them. You share the sleeping platform with at least 2 brothers, 1 sister, and possibly your cousin's elbow. Someone grumbles, someone else kicks. The baby starts to cry. The dog yawns and stretches out like royalty across the warmest part of the bedding. You sit up slowly, brushing hay from your tunic. It's the same tunic you wore yesterday, and the day before that. It smells like smoke, sweat, and soup, which, to be fair, is the signature scent of the entire cottage. Your parents are already awake. Your mother's stoking the hearth, squinting through smoke and muttering about damp kindling. Your father's outside, probably checking the thatch or yelling at the cow. No one's talking loudly. There's a quiet efficiency to the start of the day. Everything has to happen fast before the work begins. You hear the distant sound of other cottages coming to life. A cartwheel creaks. Someone's child screams about socks. A hen squawks indignantly. Morning in the village is never gentle. It's more like a slow collision of noise and chores. And the smells, not all of them good. The hearth smolders to life, and the air fills with the scent of burning wood, boiling porridge, and something you hope is yesterday's stew reheating and not someone's forgotten boot. The cottage walls are thick, but not insulated. Cold seeps in from every direction. You pull on your cloak, scratchy, patched, barely functioning, and shuffle over to the fire like a very underpaid ghost. You sit on the edge of a wobbly stool. One leg is shorter than the rest. You don't mind. It matches your posture. This early, the light is a soft gray, the kind that makes everything look both peaceful and slightly grim. You rub your eyes and stretch. Your back pops. Your knees protest. You're 17, but your joints say 40. The dog tries to sneak a lick of the stew pot. You hiss at it. It huffs and returns to its post beside the hearth, clearly offended. Your mother ladles out a bit of hot water with barley into a bowl. No honey, of course. Honey is for celebrations and feasts, not for another Tuesday of mud and complaints. You eat slowly, warming your hands on the bowl more than your belly. Someone passes you a crust of bread. It's dry enough to be used as a building material, but you dunk it in the stew water and pretend it's soft. And then, with a sigh that feels older than the beams above your head, you rise. Because the day isn't going to wait. The Lord's land won't plow itself, and your family needs the labor tallied, the tasks done, and your body out the door. You glance out the tiny window. The sun isn't quite up, but the sky is fading from black to dull blue. You grab your cap, your belt, and your resolve. Your boots are still damp from yesterday. You put them on anyway. As you step outside, the air hits you like a slap with a frozen trout. You gasp, and then you trudge, because you're a serf, and this is your life. The first thing you notice when stepping outside, besides the immediate betrayal of your boots, which are already leaking, is the smell of morning stew wafting through other cottage chimneys. It's a shared village scent, part comfort, part desperation, part please let today be a 2-potato day. You shuffle toward the wood pile, or what remains of it, and grab a few damp logs. The fire needs feeding before your own belly does, otherwise the house stays cold and the porridge stays half raw. Your fingers are stiff, the bark is wet, and one log appears to have become a temporary residence for something with legs. You toss it anyway. If it stays, it pays rent in warmth. Inside again, the hearth is holding steady now, low flames licking the blackened pot. Your mother hums quietly as she stirs, using a spoon so worn it's more suggestion than utensil. The baby is half asleep in a bundle near the fire, one hand poking out like a tiny turnip. You take your seat again, and this time, breakfast is served. And by served, we mean you're handed a wooden bowl and told not to complain. It's porridge, again. Barley, oats, maybe a pinch of salt if you're lucky. It's hot, which is its main virtue. You eat slowly, blowing on each spoonful, more out of ritual than necessity. The texture is best described as regret meets wallpaper paste, but it sticks to your ribs and keeps you from collapsing before noon, so you're not about to protest. Some days, if a neighbor has a surplus or a merciful chicken, you might get a poached egg or a bit of cheese. Today, there's no cheese. There's a rumor that someone down the path has cheese, but whether they'll admit to it is another matter. Cheese is the village equivalent of buried treasure. The dog watches you eat. You pretend not to see it. It licks its lips anyway. One of your siblings breaks off a corner of crust and slides it to the floor with practiced stealth. The dog accepts the offering with great ceremony. You finish your bowl and pass it to your mother. She rinses it with hot water and straw, muttering about someone not scraping the sides properly. Probably you. Definitely you. You slip on your cloak and step outside again. The air is still sharp, but the sun is beginning to show its reluctant face over the tree line. The frost sparkles across the fields like someone spilled a bag of sugar across the land. Pretty sure, but you're not fooled. It's still a toe-numbing, nose-dripping sort of morning. One of your neighbors is outside, too, brushing snow from the path with a birch branch. He nods at you with that shared look. Equal parts good morning and we're in this peasant nonsense together. You nod back. You spot the reeve heading up the path toward the manor, carrying his tally board and looking like he's got opinions, which he always does. That means one thing. Task assignments are coming. You need to finish your prep fast. You pop back inside and grab your satchel. It contains a very dull knife, 2 chunks of dried root, and a piece of twine you're weirdly attached to. You check your belt for the little pouch of nails. Still there. You're ready. Sort of. You splash water on your face from the jug by the door. It's not warm. You gasp, then shake it off. Cleanish is close enough. You comb your fingers through your hair, smooth your tunic, and try to look a little less like you lost a fight with a haystack. It doesn't work. You pause at the door. Your mother presses a piece of cold bread into your hand. It's your second breakfast. It'll be gone before you reach the edge of the field. You thank her anyway. Outside again. The village is coming alive. More smoke curls from rooftops. More dogs bark. A cart rattles past, its driver half asleep and chewing something that may or may not be edible. A group of children are chasing each other around a frozen puddle. One of them slips. Everyone laughs. No one offers help. It's fine. He's up again. You crunch along the path, chewing your bread, planning the day. You hope it's a good task. Not dig out the drainage ditch again or turn the manure pile, both of which were assigned last week to your considerable dismay. Maybe today's the day you finally get that fencing job near the orchard. You like the orchard. It smells like bees and secrets. As you reach the village green, you spot a few others already assembled near the manor gate. The reeve stands nearby, consulting his tally stick and occasionally sighing in a way that suggests deep disappointment in the serf population in general. You nod to a friend, Bram, a fellow serf with eyebrows like angry caterpillars and a laugh that could shatter pottery. He offers you a piece of dried plum. You accept. It's mostly pit, but sweet enough to count as a treat. The reeve calls your name. You step forward, heart sinking slightly. Please not ditches. Please not manure. Please not fields today, he says. Lord's wheat, far side of the ridge. You try not to show your disappointment. It's not the worst job, but it's not your field, and that's always the part that stings. You nod, turn, and begin the long walk out past the manor fence. The sun climbs, the frost begins to melt. The bread is long gone. Time to start the real work. The reeve doesn't walk with you. He's far too important for that. He stands near the gate, scribbling something with a bit of charcoal onto his tally stick, probably noting how many serfs arrived, how many tried to fake an injury, and who needs a reminder about their obligations. You've seen him wield that stick like it's a holy relic. You've also seen him fall asleep mid-count and blame it on the wind. Still, you can't ignore him. The reeve's word is law, at least between now and sundown, and today the law says you're heading to the far side of the manor's fields, the part locals affectionately call Backache Hollow. The wheat there hasn't been touched in weeks, left to bristle in the cold while the Lord's attention focused elsewhere, likely on hunting or composing long letters about taxes he doesn't personally collect. So, naturally, it's the serf's job to bring that field back to life, with hands and sweat, and a hoe that hasn't been sharp since the feast of St. Agatha. You trudge toward the ridge, the earth crunching beneath your boots, one of which has started to part at the heel. Your breath fogs ahead of you, fading into the morning like a ghost too polite to linger. The village disappears behind you, replaced by rows of stubbled fields, frost-glazed hedgerows, and the occasional shriek of a hungry crow. You pass a small shrine to St. Isidore, the farmer's patron, tucked under a bent tree, decorated with withered berries and a ribbon that's been there so long, it's more hope than fabric now. You give a respectful nod. It can't hurt. As you crest the ridge, you see the field in question. It's larger than you remember. That's always how it feels. Somehow, it grows overnight. The wheat stalks are sparse, dry, and angled like they're bracing for insult. The soil is hard, furrowed with ice, and stubborn in every direction. You join the handful of other laborers already there. Familiar faces, tired faces. No one speaks at first. You all know what comes next. You grab a hoe from the tools laid haphazardly under a tarp. It's slightly warped, probably cursed, and creaks when you lift it. You sigh. It sighs back. Work begins. The first swing is the worst. Jarring, slow, the metal bouncing off the frozen crust with all the grace of a dropped bucket. You reset. Dig again. This time planting your boot for leverage. A clump of soil dislodges more ice than earth. Progress. Barely. This is the Lord's domain land. That means the yield doesn't go to you or your family. It goes to the granary, the manor, and eventually the Lord's larder. You might get some crumbs later, literally, but for now, your payment is the privilege of not being fined for laziness. Historians still argue whether the average serf had any real chance at upward mobility. Some say there were occasional paths to landholding or freedom, especially through church service or extraordinary service. Others argue that for most, it was a cycle too tightly locked, one season feeding the next, each harvest weighed down by obligations rather than dreams. You wipe your brow, even though it's freezing, because the work is relentless and the heat comes from within. Nearby, Bram makes a joke about your hoe being so dull it might be more useful as a walking stick. You shoot him a look. He grins and you both chuckle. Moments like this keep the work bearable. That and the occasional song. Someone starts humming. Then another joins in. Soon, you're all grunting in rhythm, swinging hoes in time with a tune that has no words, just sound. It's not beautiful, but it's a rhythm, and that's something. Midway through the morning, you take a breath, leaning on your tool and gazing out at the fields. The sun has climbed higher now, the frost retreating. Steam rises faintly from the broken soil. Your shoulders ache, your back protests. Your hands are developing the kind of blisters that have their own opinions. You spot a crow watching you from a fence post. It tilts its head. You tilt yours back. For a moment, you consider trading places. Then you sigh and return to digging. The reeve passes by once, shouting half-hearted encouragement and pretending not to see Bram sneak a sip from a flask. You wonder, as you always do, what it's like to have a job that involves standing, writing things down, and not actively bleeding from your thumbs. Still, someone has to tally the labor. Without it, the manor's economy would crumble, at least in theory. In practice, it seems like the only thing holding it up is sheer stubbornness and barley soup. A few hours in, your mind begins to drift. You start naming the rocks you pull from the soil. That one's Jeffrey. That one's Little Jeff. That one's the devil's cabbage, because it has angered you deeply for resisting removal. By late morning, your body moves on its own, muscle memory taking over. Chop, lift, clear, repeat. The wind has picked up slightly, pushing the smell of turned earth across the ridge. Your breath comes slower now. Your legs ache, but you're still standing. You remind yourself, This isn't forever. Just until the sun moves past the trees. Just until the reeve calls time. Just until you can move on to your own little strip of land. The one you actually get to eat from. For now, though, it's the Lord's wheat and your sweat. The sun's a bit higher now. Not warm exactly, but high enough to remind you time is moving. You lean on your hoe, briefly, letting your arms dangle and your breath catch. Around you, the other serfs do the same, one by one, taking the opportunity to reset their backs and contemplate the universe, or at least the immediate proximity of lunch. You pull a small cloth from your satchel and wipe your brow. It was white once. Now it's a patchwork of soil tones and last week's onion. You drink from a small flask of tepid water, the kind that's never quite clean, never quite cold, and always slightly metallic. It tastes like rust and effort. You savor it like it's wine. Then the reeve's voice floats across the field, not shouting, just clearing his throat. Loudly, you sigh, stretch your shoulders, and return to your work. This time it's mending furrows, lines in the soil left uneven from last autumn's hurried harvest. The Lord's wheat, delicate and noble as it may be, has a tendency to sulk if the ground isn't perfectly level. You're tasked with smoothing the land-breaking clods and removing rocks that seem to regenerate like magical forest mushrooms. One of the rocks has a name now, Gerald. He's the worst. Your hoe strikes something hard and sharp. You dig around it. A fragment of pottery, maybe old manorware or a forgotten pot. You toss it aside. Bram nearby mutters, "Add it to the museum." You smirk. He's got a growing collection of ancient relics, all of which appear to be broken tiles and snail shells. The work is tedious, yes, but your feet are moving, your hands are busy, and for a little while, the rhythm settles into something oddly soothing. Chop, scrape, lift. You could almost call it meditation, if not for the occasional cramp and the constant sound of someone sneezing into their elbow. The field slopes gently downward, and your boots slip more often than they hold. Each step is a careful wager between gravity and grip. Your left foot wins. Your right foot is staging a protest. You drag it forward anyway. Tools in the village are shared, which means yours has history, etched initials, a handle worn to a curve shaped like a different man's hand. The metal is dull, but not useless. Historians still debate how effective medieval agricultural tools truly were. Some argue they were cleverly adapted to local soils. Others say they were barely better than swinging a stick. As you wrangle your hoe through another patch of clay, you're leaning toward the stick theory. A cart passes in the distance, rattling down the dirt path toward the manor. A boy rides it, singing something off-key about frogs. You pause just long enough to consider faking a twisted ankle for a lift home. Then you sigh and keep working. Field birds dart overhead. One lands near your foot, pecking at freshly turned earth. You call it your supervisor. It ignores you, as supervisors do. Bram starts humming again, and this time others join in. It's not a song with words, really, just a melody passed around the rows. You catch yourself keeping time with the swings of your hoe. It doesn't make the work lighter, but it passes the minutes. Eventually, you swap tasks with another serf. He was clearing brambles. Now it's your turn. The brambles greet you like old enemies, thorny and smug. You pull on gloves with holes and dive in. Brambles, it turns out, have opinions. They cling, they resist, they fight back. You curse one softly under your breath. It retaliates by snagging your sleeve and nearly removing it. You counter with a glare. It remains unfazed. A thorn finds its way through your glove. You hiss, pull your hand back, and suck your finger. Blood, just a little, enough to feel real. The price of progress, apparently. You pull harder, finally yanking the bramble free, roots and all. You hold it up like a trophy. Bram applauds. Someone nearby mutters, "Champion of the hedge." You bow mockingly. There's a strange satisfaction to it, even in pain. You're reshaping the land, making it cleaner, easier to plant. It won't feed your family directly, but it will feed someone who will in turn give you a coin, a loaf, or a few days without obligation. Or so the system goes. Your arms ache now. Your knees pop every time you shift. You've sweat enough to leave salt lines on your tunic, and the wind is drying them into stripes. Still, there's a strange camaraderie in shared misery. Everyone here is sore. Everyone's got blisters. Everyone's silently wondering if this plot of land is cursed. That, at least, is something. The reeve circles again, marking his stick. You straighten up a bit, feigning a fresher stance than your bones allow. He squints at your progress, nods, moves on. That counts as praise. You glance at the sun, not quite midday. You sigh. Your stomach grumbles in agreement, and you dig in again. By now you've developed a system: right hand forward, left foot brace, swing low, twist, just enough to dislodge a patch of soil without toppling face first into it. Your shoulders protest, your fingers are blistering, and you've accidentally renamed one of your toes traitor after it bent backward in your boot on a rogue stone. But somehow, the work continues. The sun has climbed high enough to cast awkward shadows across the rows, long, jagged lines that stretch from bent bodies to the edges of the Lord's field. You squint up and try to gauge how long until the reeve calls a pause. You're hungry? Everyone's hungry. One man is staring at his belt like he might chew it. For now, you keep your focus on the wheat rows. The Lord's grain needs your attention, and not because you care deeply about his yield. You care because his steward really cares, and if you're found slacking, you'll be fined a loaf of bread or a day of labor, and neither is easy to spare. Your breath steams in the cold despite your sweat. Bits of chaff cling to your sleeves, and you're fairly sure something has taken up residence in your sock. It wriggles once. You pretend it didn't. You swing again. This land isn't yours. Not the tools, not the wheat, not the fences that hem it in. You're a tenant in every sense, tethered to duty, obligation, and a whole bunch of traditions no one quite remembers the origin of. All you know is you owe the Lord a certain number of days, and today's one of them. Historians still debate just how many days per year a serf like you had to labor on the Lord's land. Some say 50, some say 100. Some suggest it varied by season, whim, or the reeve's mood, which, frankly, feels accurate. There's a moment of stillness when the wind dies, and the only sound is the rhythmic chopping of metal into earth. It's weirdly soothing, until a sneeze from Bram breaks the silence, followed by a dramatic curse and the announcement, "A bug just went in my nose." You don't even look up. That's his journey now. The rows get shorter. That's the only reward today. Progress by distance, not pay. Your muscles are sore, but the rhythm helps. There's a strange pride in doing something hard, even if it's invisible to everyone but the ground. And then, mercy. The reeve raises his arm and calls for rest. No horn, no grand announcement, just a brief grunt and a gesture like he's shooing a pigeon, but it means freedom, if only for a bit. You lower your tool and groan, not unlike a barn door. Your legs are trembling. You flop down on a large, flat rock someone has christened the throne of the tired, and you dig into your satchel. Lunch is simple, always is. A chunk of bread. You tear it with your teeth. It's hard, dense, and a little sour. You don't mind. It's food. Alongside it, a small hunk of cheese the color of old parchment and a bruised apple that's gone soft in one corner. You carve around it with a dull blade and chew thoughtfully. Bram flops down next to you, his flask already out. He offers a sip, warm ale that tastes like it's been aged in a boot. You accept it like it's the elixir of life. Other serfs settle in small groups, eating, gossiping, massaging limbs. Someone pulls out a reed pipe. It makes 3 notes badly and 1 note worse. But he plays anyway. A few laugh. One woman hums along. For a moment, the field becomes a place of community rather than work. You pull off your boots just for a minute. The smell is impressive. You set them in the sun, hoping the warmth will do something magical. You wiggle your toes and pretend you're on holiday. Lunch doesn't last long. It never does. Just enough time to stop the shaking in your hands, stretch your spine, and feel human again. Someone tells a story about a man who found a gold coin buried in a furrow. The reeve scowled, declared it Lord's treasure, and took it for the manor coffers. You all groan. Then someone else adds, "But I heard the man replaced it with a painted pebble, and the steward never noticed." That version gets applause. You finish the last of your apple and chuck the core toward the hedgerow. A chicken, no one knows where it came from, runs out, pecks it once, and vanishes. You blink. No one else sees it. Probably for the best. Then it's time. Tools are picked up again. Cloaks are tightened. Boots are laced. The reeve circles, hands behind his back like he's leading a parade of the unwilling. You sigh, roll your shoulders, and trudge back toward the next row. It looks longer than the last. They always do. But the work must go on. The sun waits for no serf. Back to it. You lift the hoe again and feel the weight of it settle into your palm like a tired argument. The handle's familiar now, though not exactly comfortable. It has grooves, splinters, and the faint warmth of morning labor still clinging to it. You glance down the next furrow and sigh. You tell yourself it's the last one before you move to your own strip of land. But you said that 3 times already. You brace your legs and swing low, carving into the soil with slow determination. The field is quieter now, the lunch chatter replaced once again by the gritty rhythm of toil. One man coughs. A woman nearby mutters a string of words that may be a prayer or an insult, possibly both. You press on. There are no bathroom breaks here, at least not official ones. If nature calls, you look for the nearest bush or hedgerow and hope you're not spotted by the reeve, or worse, old Marga, who reports everything. You once sneezed too close to her cow, and she accused you of cursing the milk. Ever since, you've given her barn a wide berth. Today, you sneak away for a moment. Your back's cramping, and your hand is bleeding a little from where your glove tore on a bramble earlier. You walk down to the edge of the field, pretending to check the fencing. It's broken, yes, but you're not here to fix it. You duck behind a thicket of elder and stretch your arms, exhaling slowly into the cold air. It's the only real privacy you'll get all day. You take a moment longer than necessary. The wind rustles the bare branches. A crow lands nearby and eyes you like it's expecting a speech. You offer none, just a shrug and a cracked-lipped smile. Back to the row. You swing your hoe again and feel the ache climb your spine. Not sharp, just constant, low, and slightly smug. You suspect medieval serfdom was less about oppression and more about joints slowly filing complaints with no supervisor to hear them. There's a rhythm again, but a slower one. The earlier energy has burned off. Now it's about endurance. You've settled into that odd space where time stretches. Minutes blend. The field feels eternal. And somehow, you're okay with that. Someone starts humming again. A different tune. Lower, slower. It moves through the air like smoke, weaving between furrows and sweat. You join in without realizing it. The reeve walks past again. He's chewing on something, possibly bark, and muttering numbers. You don't look up. Neither does Bram, who is now working shirtless and steaming like a misplaced bathhouse. The sun begins to tilt westward. Shadows return, longer this time. You glance toward the edge of the field where the hedgerow marks the border between lord's land and tenant plots. Almost time to switch, almost time to tend your own strip, the one that matters. Historians still debate whether serfs resented doing the Lord's work more than tending their own. Some argue the system was accepted as natural. Others suggest subtle resistance, slower work, tool accidents, mysteriously disappearing sacks of grain. You've never been bold enough for sabotage, but you do know how to slow your pace just enough to stay out of trouble. Your mind wanders again, as it often does during the final stretch. You think of dinner, what's left of the salted fish, whether the stew pot still has any flavor in it, whether your sister's new bread recipe will rise this time or turn into another doorstop. You think of spring, of planting, of maybe, just maybe, a bit of barley you can keep for yourself this time. You don't dream big, just warm, just full. Your hand slips on the hoe. You curse under your breath and wipe your palm on your tunic. The blister popped, and now it stings. You wrap it in cloth from your satchel, the same one that used to be part of your uncle's shirt. He wouldn't mind. He's using the rest of it as a window shutter. Bram gives you a nod. Last row, he says. You nod back. I'll believe it when I see it. A few chuckles rise from the line. Humor lives here. It's quiet, dry, but persistent, like a weed, the good kind. And then, at last, the reeve calls out, not for rest, but for release. Switch to your own fields, he bellows, like a man whose voice was trained by shouting at pigs. You straighten, you stretch, you groan like the beams in a windstorm. And then, with slow, sore dignity, you lift your hoe and begin the walk back toward your own little strip of land. It's not much, it never is, but it's yours, and that means everything. Your feet crunch over the hardened path as you walk toward your plot, passing the hedgerow and slipping through the thin wooden fence that marks the end of the Lord's land and the beginning of your own tiny realm. It's not large, just a strip of earth the width of a cart and about as long as the chapel aisle, but it's yours. Well, sort of. You lease it from the Lord, technically. But within this rectangle of stubborn soil, you get to call the shots. which means deciding whether the weeds stay or go and how many times you sigh dramatically while pulling them. You reach your field and pause, letting the familiarity wash over you, the same bent fence post that refuses to stay upright. The stone your father once tried to remove with a rope and 3 grown men. The spot where last year's beans staged their brief, glorious rebellion against the caterpillars. You roll your shoulders and get to work. Unlike the manor field, where every swing is monitored and every breath feels taxed, your plot has a different rhythm. There's still labor, still sweat, but also a strange sense of peace. Here, your sweat is an investment. Every turn of the soil might feed your family come harvest. Every onion matters. You start by checking the furrows. The soil's cold but not frozen. You test it with your boot, then with your hoe. It gives a little, grudgingly. That's a good sign. You clear a row of old stalks, tossing them into a pile to burn later. As you pull, a handful of worms tumble out. Surprised and offended, you apologize quietly. It seems polite. Then you crouch down to inspect your onion bed. The shoots are short, stubby, and clearly annoyed by the cold. One of them has fallen over in what you interpret as protest. You write it with gentle fingers. "Hang in there, lad," you mutter. "Spring's coming." Bram passes by, waving with a grin. "Growing anything edible this year?" "Hopefully," you call back, "if the mice leave me something." He laughs. You don't. The mice are relentless. The sun's lower now, casting a golden smear across the fields. You move slowly, weeding, inspecting, patting the earth as if it's a restless dog that needs reassurance. A bird lands on the fence post, maybe the same one from earlier. You nod at it. It does not nod back. Rude. You pause for a sip of water, letting your hand trail over the shoots and stalks. Each one has a name now, not officially, but you've spent so many hours bent over them it's hard not to personalize. That crooked carrot, Bernard, that too small turnip, Gertrude, the one cabbage that looks slightly ominous, Margaret. Historians sometimes romanticize peasant connection to the land, painting serfs as serene tillers of soil with deep spiritual ties to nature. Others argue it was survival, plain and simple. You think maybe it's both. There's something about coaxing life from reluctant dirt that does feel sacred, especially when failure means a very hungry winter. You look over at your neighbor's plot, neater than yours if you're honest. Her rows are perfectly spaced. Her leeks stand like soldiers. You suspect sorcery. Or maybe she just has more time without 4 siblings constantly stepping in her compost pile. Still, your field has character. A patch of early mustard greens is trying its best. You give them an encouraging poke. You clear out a few rocks, including one that looks suspiciously like Gerald's cousin. You pause to fix your boundary marker, a crooked stick with a rag tied to it. It's leaning toward your neighbor's side again. She claims it's the wind. You suspect strategic poking. You hammer it deeper with a rock and glare in its general direction. Nearby, a child chases a chicken. Neither of them are winning. You crouch again and dig a small trench, tossing compost from a sack you dragged here last week. It's fragrant, a blend of manure, food scraps, and things you don't talk about at dinner. You shovel it in with the reverence of someone who knows just how many vegetables this stink might feed. Time passes strangely in your own field. You lose track of minutes. You work by instinct, smoothing, planting, fussing. At one point, You stop just to stretch your back and watch the clouds. One of them looks like a pig. You smile. Your hands are caked with dirt. Your knees ache. Your neck is sunburned and cold at the same time, which feels unfair. But your heart feels slightly lighter. This is your strip. Your onions, your blisters, your hopes lined up in rows. Eventually, the sky begins to dim. You brush your hands off on your tunic, gather your tools, and give one last look over your patch. Not bad, not perfect, but growing. The walk back from the field is slow, steady, and just shy of a stumble. Your legs feel like wet laundry. Your arms swing lazily by your sides, more out of momentum than intent. The tools clatter in your satchel with each step, and every thud reminds you just how sore your shoulders really are. The village greets you with familiar sounds, distant voices, the thud of an axe against wood, a baby wailing for a reason known only to itself. The chickens are making their evening fuss, which is their way of demanding dinner while pretending they'd never caused trouble. You're not fooled. Your first stop is the animal pen. The pigs are already complaining. There are 3 of them, each with a personality you'd rather not describe in polite company. The largest, Wilfred, by mutual agreement, is trying to dig under the fence again. The smallest one has managed to flip its feeding trough and now stares at you like you did it. You sigh, grab the trough, flip it upright, and scoop out a few handfuls of kitchen scraps and bran mash. They dive in, snorting and jostling. One steps on your foot. You accept it. That's just who you are now, a human footrest for pigs. The cow is next. She's chewing slowly, her eyes half-lidded in that meditative bovine way. You check her water bucket, still half full. You pat her flank and mutter a few kind words, mostly in the hopes she won't kick you tomorrow. She probably will, but maybe with less malice. Chicken's next. The coop smells like, well, like a coop. Warm, feathery, and aggressively barnyard. You count them, 1, 2, 3, 4, and Mildred, who insists on roosting in the rafters like a tiny feathery queen. You scatter some grain, and they descend like feathered piranhas, pecking, flapping, bickering. You step back. You've lost enough dignity to poultry for 1 week. The dog watches all of this from his spot near the fence. He yawns. You suspect he's judging your technique. He gets a scratch behind the ears anyway. Your feet crunch over straw and old mud as you return to the cottage. The door creaks as you push it open, and the wave of warmth and stew scent hits you like a welcome hug from someone wearing onion perfume. You don't even mind. Inside, the hearth glows low and golden. Your mother's at the pot, stirring slowly. A chunk of root vegetable surfaces and vanishes again. The baby is asleep in a basket near the fire, wrapped in so many layers, she looks like a turnip in swaddling. You set down your tools by the wall, near the others. The hoe gets a place of honor, leaning against the corner like an old soldier who's earned his rest. You drop onto a stool, the worst one. It wobbles. You adjust. It wobbles differently. You give up. Your siblings are strewn about the room, one spinning yarn, one poking the fire, another trying to teach the cat not to sit on the bread shelf. The cat is not interested in education. You pull off your boots with a grunt. One is wet, one is wetter. You place them near the fire to dry, though you suspect they'll still be damp come morning. It's their natural state now. You peel off your outer cloak and hang it on a nail by the door. It drips faintly. Rain tomorrow, perhaps. or just the lingering grudge of yesterday's snow. Dinner is nearly ready, which in surf terms means whatever didn't go bad yet. Tonight's menu, stew, again. You don't complain. Stew is reliable. Stew never judges you. You glance the pot and try to guess what's in it. Definitely turnip, possibly cabbage, a whisper of barley, a piece of dried meat if you're lucky. If not, it's a very convincing imitation. Historians agree that most peasants relied on one-pot meals throughout the year, especially in winter or lean seasons. What they can't agree on is how often protein appeared in the peasant diet. Some say rarely, others argue it varied widely. You personally side with whenever a chicken dies of natural causes and no one is looking. Your mother ladles stew into wooden bowls, setting them out on the table, or at least the flattest surface available. There's a pause as everyone gathers. You squeeze in, knees bumping someone else's, elbows narrowly avoiding soup disaster. Dinner begins not with prayer, but with the clatter of spoons and a communal grunt of approval. It's hot, and that's enough. The stew is better than expected. There's something smoky in it, maybe from the hearth, maybe from last week's sausage rind. You don't ask. You dip a crust of bread in it, soaking up every drop. You chew slowly, savoring it like it's spiced meat from the king's table. Someone offers a joke. It's bad. Everyone laughs. Someone spills a spoonful. The dog is instantly alert. You lean back against the wall, cradling your bowl and letting your muscles begin their slow revolt. You don't fight it. You just sit and breathe and watch the fire flicker. The day's behind you now. Your field is tucked in. The animals are fed. The chores, well, there are always more. But for now, they can wait. For now, you eat, and it's enough. The stew's gone, wiped clean from the bowls with hunks of bread that could double as roofing tiles. You lick your spoon and set it aside, content in the knowledge that it won't be washed so much as wiped with a cloth that's already seen 3 generations of soups. Now begins the evening shift, the unspoken second half of a serf's day, because dinner doesn't end with sitting around and groaning appreciatively. It ends with more work. You drag yourself upright from the stool, which creaks like a ship in stormy waters, and start toward the bucket near the door. It's water-fetching time. Again, because someone, likely you, used the last bit to soak the firewood or the baby or both. You hoist the wooden bucket and step back into the dusk. The sky is streaked now, deep blue stretching toward black, clouds painted with faint orange as the sun makes its final exit. You breathe in the cold air. It tastes like chimney smoke and wet grass, with a hint of regret. Your boots squish with every step toward the well. The well is at the center of the village, a mossy, stone-rimmed landmark you visited more times than you've seen your own reflection. Tonight, you're not alone. A few other villagers are there, exchanging pleasantries that sound more like polite grunts than words. You lower the bucket. The rope creaks as it descends. A distant splash echoes up the shaft. You draw it back with effort, your arms aching anew. The bucket emerges full, sloshing, cold enough to make your hands stiffen instantly. You balance it carefully. One spill, and it's another round trip. And your legs are not taking applications for additional use this evening. Back home, you pour it into the household barrel, pausing to splash a little onto your face. It jolts you more than expected. The baby wakes and glares at you like you personally offended her ancestors. You shrug. She'll get over it. Then it's on to the animals. Yes, again. You can't feed them just once, not if you want them to continue being vaguely edible. The pigs are still muddy, still snorting, still engaged in whatever mysterious internal politics pigs observe. You add more scraps, double-check the fencing, and give Wilfred the pig a look that says, "Don't you dare." The cow gets another check-in, too. Her eyes follow you like a monk, judging your posture. She shifts her weight, but otherwise seems content. You refill her water, scatter a bit of hay, and mutter, "You live a charmed life, you know." She snorts. You take that as agreement. The chickens are roosting now, fluffed into little clumps of feathery self-importance. You count them again. Mildred is, predictably, still in the rafters. She hasn't descended since last week. You stopped questioning it. With the chores done, mostly, you trudge back inside for the final wind down of the day. Inside the cottage, it's cozy in that smoky, cramped sort of way. The fire pops in the hearth. The scent of stew lingers like a fond memory. Your siblings are lounging in the dim light, some half asleep, some poking at old socks, and one trying to fix a wooden spoon with a knife in sheer optimism. You grab a bit of twine and set to mending a hole in your cloak. The stitching isn't pretty, but it holds. You murmur a tune as you work, a lullaby your mother used to hum. It doesn't have real words anymore, just sounds worn smooth over the years. Historians sometimes forget just how much domestic labor happened after dark. Yes, you've spent all day in the fields, but night is for spinning, sewing, mending, boiling water, drying herbs, fixing tools, and solving arguments about who keeps stealing the cheese rind. Your theory, the cat. Tonight, your mother is patching a blanket. Your sister is picking burrs out of someone's cloak. Your brother is nodding off while holding a pair of socks that may never be finished. You admire the effort. You rise once more to bank the fire, carefully adding peat and ash to slow the burn overnight. It's a skill. Too little, and you wake up frozen. Too much, and the house smells like regret for hours. The baby hiccups once and goes back to sleep. The dog turns 3 circles, then collapses with a groan. You dim the lantern and look around. There's stillness now, a rare, fleeting quiet that only appears in these small windows between duty and sleep. You sit again, this time on the floor by the hearth, letting the heat soak into your bones. Your legs are stiff, your hands raw, and your stomach is still humming pleasantly with turnip stew. Tomorrow will look exactly like today. And you're oddly okay with that, because you've done what needed doing. And now comes the best part of the day. Absolutely nothing. You don't fall asleep right away. Not because you're not tired. You are intensely, thoroughly, right down to your soul tired, but because there are still a few loose ends to tie up before bed. And by loose ends, you mostly mean livestock-related paranoia and family-wide negotiations over who gets the good blanket. The fire dims with a low crackle, painting long shadows across the cottage walls. You stretch out your legs near the hearth, staring into the embers. You don't mean to get lost in thought, but the rhythm of the glowing coals is hard to resist. Someone nudges your foot. It's your sister, holding out a small wooden bowl with a few shriveled berries in it. The last of last year's black currants, sour, chewy, slightly musty. But they're sweet enough to count as dessert. You pop one in your mouth and immediately wish there were 20 more, or that you had teeth less offended by surprise acidity. You hand the bowl back and rise slowly, your knees voicing their concerns as you do. You head to the corner by the door where the animal feed is stored, one last scoop for the morning. You measure it by feel. No one counts exacts here. You've learned to trust the weight in your hand, the memory in your muscles. You double-check the shutter, securing it with a crooked wooden peg that falls out if you sneeze too hard. Then you run through the mental list. Pigs fed, cow watered, fire banked, shoes drying, family accounted for. Mostly, your cousin Giles isn't back yet. Probably over at his uncle's barn again, trying to tune his lute. It only has one string, and that string is held in place by beeswax and hope. He insists he's working on a song. You suspect he's working on an excuse to avoid chores. Either way, he'll sneak in later and stub his toe on the firewood. You hear the church bell in the distance, 3 soft tones for evening prayer. You pause. You don't always kneel, not every night, but tonight feels still, feels worthy. So you murmur a few words to yourself, for the fields, for the family, for the cow who hasn't kicked anyone all week. A miracle, truly. Prayer done, you help with the final sweep, checking that the tools are where they should be, that the fire tongs haven't been borrowed by the neighbor again, and that the cat isn't nesting in the flour sack. She is. You move her. She returns. You accept your fate. Then comes the most delicate operation of the entire day. Bedtime arrangements. In theory, there's an order. Elders on the wall side, children in the middle, and anyone who snores gets the outer edge. In practice, it's chaos. Your brother always hogs the blanket. Your sister insists on sleeping with one foot in the firelight. And someone always forgets to take off their belt. You unroll the sleeping mat, a large stuffed sack that was once your grandmother's cloak. You add straw, rearrange the rushes, tug the blanket to your corner preemptively. You've been burned before. The air in the cottage is warmer now, thanks to the fire and the bodies packed within it. You can almost pretend the walls don't have drafts. Almost. The corner near the door still whistles when the wind gets high. You stuff a bit of cloth in the crack. It flutters anyway. Your mother is already dozing, her hands folded neatly on her stomach like she's waiting for someone to compliment her stew. Your youngest brother is curled into a ball so tight he looks like a roll of wool. The dog is sprawled out across 3 toes worth of sleeping space, snoring with the conviction of a much larger animal. You squeeze into your spot, pulling the blanket over your shoulders. It smells like smoke, stew, and a long winter. You don't mind. The quiet settles again. Someone coughs once. Someone else shifts and mutters in their sleep. The straw mattress crackles faintly as you adjust. You think about the day, the work, the wind, the field, the onion that may or may not survive until next week. You think about your plot, your cabbage with the strong opinions, your turnips staging a slow-motion protest, your mustard greens pushing through like stubborn prayers. You're tired, deeply so, but you're also oddly satisfied. You did what needed doing. Nothing fancy, nothing grand, but real. You feel the warmth from the fire fading into your toes. You hear the last pop of a coal in the hearth. You close your eyes and listen to the sounds of the cottage, breathing, shuffling, the gentle hum of rest. And then the pig squeals loudly inside the house. You sit bolt upright and see Wilfred in the doorway, muddy and triumphant, tail twitching like a banner. He's managed to push the latch with his snout. Again, the dog blinks. Everyone groans. You throw off the blanket, muttering curses under your breath, and begin the pig retrieval process for the third time this week. Life as a serf, never boring. You guide Wilfred, the mud-encrusted, snorty prince of poor decisions, out of the house with gentle firmness and just a hint of exasperated muttering. He trots off smugly, hooves squelching in the damp earth outside the door. You secure the latch again, double knot it with some twine, and wedge a bucket against it for good measure. Back inside, the cottage sighs. Not literally, but it might as well. The fire lets off a soft pop. The rushes on the floor rustle as your siblings resettle. Someone mutters, "Not again," and promptly returns to sleep, which seems both unfair and admirable. You flop back down into your spot, tug the blanket over your chest, and resume your slow slide into sleep. Except now your legs are cold, your elbow is in a weird place, and your knee is suspiciously damp. Thank you, Wilfred. You exhale and close your eyes anyway. But no luck. Your brain decides this is the perfect moment to remember all the small repairs you didn't do today. The fence near the turnip patch still leans at a worrying angle. The barn door creaks like a ghost with joint pain. The lid of the grain chest doesn't close properly, and the cat keeps sleeping on it like she owns the place. She might. You shift under the blanket. Then remember tomorrow is thatching day at your uncle's house, which means hauling straw, climbing roofs, and listening to your cousin Erwin explain again why he thinks chickens understand Latin. You sigh again, this time more theatrically. Finally, you sit up. If you're not going to sleep, you might as well be useful. You grab the broken bucket from the corner, the one with the split handle, and move to the hearth, where there's just enough light from the glowing coals to see what you're doing. You pull out your repair kit. A bent nail, a bit of wire, and a knife so dull it would struggle to cut butter if butter had any resolve. You hold the bucket between your knees, line up the handle, and start threading the wire through, hands moving on autopilot. This is the part of the evening where things slow down completely. Everyone else is asleep or almost there. The baby makes little breathy sighs. Your mother snores faintly like a kitten with a blocked nose. Someone kicks the blanket and mumbles about cabbages. You keep working, lulled by the quiet. Fixing things with no tools is a special art. It's part improvisation, part stubbornness, and part inherited wisdom from people who knew that buying something new was a fantasy. You loop the wire around twice, pull it tight, and press it flat with a rock. It'll hold for a little while. You set the bucket aside and look around the room, checking mentally for what else needs doing. The fire grate is fine. The drying herbs are still hanging neatly. The ladder to the loft might need tightening soon, but not tonight. You catch sight of the window, just a slit in the wall with a shutter, and remember the rain that snuck in last week. You grab a bit of cloth and stuff it along the edge, where the draft comes through like a gossiping neighbor. Historians often debate just how bad the structural conditions of peasant homes were. Some argue they were miserable, damp, barely better than huts. Others say that with enough care and regular upkeep, they were reasonably snug. You suspect it's both. Depends on how many pigs sneak in. You crawl back to your spot near the hearth. Finally, allowing your body to relax. You lie flat, eyes tracing the dark beams above you. One of them creaks. You name it, Walter. Walter's been complaining all winter. Your hands are rough. Your fingers still ache from the hoe, the wire, the cold. You flex them gently under the blanket, pressing your palms to your stomach to absorb the lingering warmth from dinner. You can hear the wind outside now. It brushes against the walls like a broom, soft and constant. A reminder that the seasons are shifting. That spring isn't far. That planting time is coming. That more work is always waiting. And yet, there's a strange comfort in it. Out there, the world is large and wild and uncertain. In here, it's small, smoky, and knowable. You roll onto your side, nestling into the blanket, knees tucked, arms folded. You can feel the soft breath of your sister beside you. The dog's tail thumps once as he adjusts. The fire whispers its last few words for the night. You don't remember falling asleep, but you do at last. Morning creeps in, not with a shout, but a shuffle, a creak from the loft, a sneeze from your brother, the soft scritch of the dog stretching against the door. You feel it before you fully wake, the cold at your nose, the weight of the blanket over your legs, the dull ache in your shoulders that politely reminds you you're still a medieval serf. Your eyes open to gray light filtering through the shutter gap, not bright, not cheery, but just enough to say, it begins again. You lie there for a moment, letting the quiet hold you. It's the best part of the day, not because it's peaceful, but because it's the only moment that belongs entirely to you. No tools in hand, no tasks shouted at you, just your breath and straw in your hair. Eventually, duty taps you on the ribs. You sit up slowly, brushing hay from your tunic and blinking at the smoky room around you. Someone's already moving near the hearth. Your mother, stirring the ashes, coaxing the fire back to life like an old friend. The others begin to rouse. There's groaning, some grumbling, and one very clear declaration from your sister that she wasn't done sleeping yet. No one is. But the rooster disagrees, loudly. You pull on your damp boots, which are somehow colder than they were yesterday. One of them squelches. You pretend it didn't. Outside, the frost is back, painted on the edges of the shutters, clinging to the thatch and crunching underfoot as you step out to start the morning chores. The air hits you like a bucket of cold porridge. You inhale. You regret it. You begin, as always, with the animals. The pigs are already awake, snorting their indignation at not being served breakfast in bed. Wilfred meets your eyes through the fence, defiant as ever. You give him his feed, mutter something half encouraging, and move on to the cow. She's patient this morning, or perhaps just cold enough to stay still. You check her water, refill the trough, and scratch behind her ears. She doesn't thank you, but her ears twitch with minimal contempt. Progress. The chickens are next, already flapping down from their perches, clucking like the sunrise is personally offensive. You scatter grain and dodge Mildred's low swoop from the rafters. She's taken to dive bombing at feeding time. You suspect she's in charge now. Back at the cottage, the fire has bloomed into something more generous. The pot is back on, and the familiar scent of barley porridge has returned. You drop onto the stool, the same one, still wobbly, and accept your breakfast with tired thanks. It tastes the same as always. warm, slightly bland, with the faintest hint of something you hope is herb and not leftover onion rind. You chew slowly, letting the heat creep into your hands from the bowl. No one says much. You're all saving your voices for the shouts and sighs ahead. Your father arrives from outside, breath fogging in the air. "Fence needs mending," he says, like he's commenting on the weather. Again, you nod. You knew it. There's always something. The morning routine continues. Someone fetches water. Someone stirs the pot again. Someone's trying to find the second mitten that vanished sometime in October. And you? You grab your cloak, your belt, and your hoe, the same one, slightly more splintered than yesterday. You step outside again. The village is slowly waking. Chimney smoke rising in lazy curls, animals stirring, doors creaking open. You see Bram already heading toward the Reeves house, hands in his pockets, posture of a man who's negotiating with the day ahead. You catch up with him. "Frost's back," he says. You nod. "So are my blisters." He chuckles. At the green, the Reeve is waiting. He looks more tired than usual, which is impressive. He scratches something onto a bit of bark with a piece of chalk. Today's assignments: another day of fences, of clearing bramble, of helping with roof repairs at the manor. You listen, you nod, you don't argue. What would be the point? Historians often note how little control serfs had over their days. But within the monotony, within the repetitive cycles, there's a strange rhythm. You begin to anticipate the work like a tide. Not because you want it, but because it's there, waiting. You glance at the sky. Clouds today. Maybe rain by evening, maybe not. You pull your cloak tighter. Your hands grip your hoe. And just like that, your day begins again. You head back to the same field with Bram, trudging side by side in that companionable silence forged by shared blisters and mutual dread of fencing duty. The tools clank in your belt. The cold has settled in your sleeves. Your left boot has decided heroically to begin leaking again. At least you know what to expect. The fence in question is a humble row of wooden posts that has, for the third time this season, decided it would rather be a pile of firewood. Half the slats are crooked, 2 are missing entirely, and 1 has been adopted as a scratching post by a particularly judgmental goat. You and Bram divide up the tasks. He starts digging out the old posts, and you begin inspecting the replacement ones stacked nearby. Inspecting in this case means identifying which ones haven't rotted, splintered, or been partially chewed. You select the least wobbly of the lot and begin fitting it into the first hole. It leans dramatically to one side. You sigh, reposition, and jam in a wedge of stone to brace it. It leans the other way. You stare at it, and for a moment, it feels personal. Fence repair is one of those jobs that sounds simple, just wood and nails, right? But quickly reveals its true identity, a never-ending duel between gravity and hope. Especially when your hammer is a rock, and your nails were bent long before you got them. You try one nail. It goes in crooked. You try again. It goes further crooked. Eventually, you hammer it sideways and declare victory. Historians still debate how sturdy medieval fences actually were. Many were makeshift, frequently patched, and more symbolic than effective. Yours is no exception. While you work, Bram begins talking about his dream from the night before. It involved a duck, the miller's daughter, and a river that spoke Latin. You nod along, hammering as he describes it in increasing detail. None of it makes sense. All of it is oddly soothing. After an hour, you've repaired 3 sections. The fence is technically upright, though it does zigzag in a way that might make it eligible for sainthood as a miracle. You stand back, arms folded, nodding like a carpenter with very low standards. The goat reappears. You glare. He stares back. A truce is silently declared. For now. You break for a moment, sitting on an overturned bucket and rubbing your hands. The cold has crept into your fingers, making every movement feel like a minor betrayal. You take a swig of water, chew on a piece of dried root, and think about dinner. Again. Then, without being told, you rise and keep working. There's more to patch, a bent hinge on the gate, a loose board that flaps in the wind, a bit of thatch falling from the nearby shed. You don't have to fix the shed, but once you see it, you can't ignore it. That's the unspoken rule of village life. If you see it and it's broken, it becomes your problem. You climb onto a log, reach up to the shed roof, and press the thatch back into place, tucking it into the cross beams like a mother adjusting a child's blanket. It holds. Barely. You dust off your hands and jump down, landing in a puddle that makes your entire foot rethink its life choices. By now the sun is overhead, or what passes for overhead, in a sky that hasn't been blue since Michaelmas. You and Bram sit for a bit, watching the chickens from the neighboring field scratch the earth with the furious energy of creatures who don't understand taxes. "Think we'll ever build a fence that stays up?" he asks. "Only if it's blessed by 3 saints and tied with pig intestines," you reply. He nods solemnly. "I've got 1 pig. Think that's enough?" You both laugh, the kind that comes out of sheer exhaustion. Then you return to work. You shift to the final stretch of fence near the hedgerow. The brambles are back, of course. Brambles never leave. They just wait. Patient, thorny, vengeful. You pull on your gloves and start trimming, snapping off the worst offenders and dragging them into a pile. One latches onto your sleeve and refuses to let go. You name it Agnes. She's a menace. Eventually, the work tapers off. Not because it's done, but because the light begins to change. That soft, golden hue that signals the day's last chapter. You pack your tools, straighten the leaning fence post once more for good measure, and give the goat one last glare. He nods. The truce holds. You and Bram walk back toward the village, slower now, tired, but with that quiet satisfaction that comes from a day's work behind you and no one shouting your name. Back home, you set the tools aside and check your hands. Dirt in every crease, splinters in at least 2 fingers, a bruise you don't remember earning. You wash quickly, water cold, rag rough, and dry your hands on the hem of your tunic. Evening chores still await, but the hard part's done, for now. Dinner tonight smells promising, and that's saying something. You enter the cottage to a thick, savory aroma that instantly makes your stomach lurch forward in enthusiasm, dragging the rest of your body behind it. Something has been simmering for hours. Turnip, leek, and maybe even a sliver of dried sausage. You squint into the pot. No meat visible, but the ghost of meat absolutely present. Your mother ladles stew into bowls, her arms moving automatically, efficiently. She doesn't smile, but there's a softness in her posture that tells you she's pleased. Maybe the stew came out better than expected. Maybe she's just relieved Wilfred the pig stayed outside today. You grab your usual seat. Well, you attempt to. Your brother is already there. You squint at him. He raises an eyebrow and gestures vaguely toward the spot next to him, which is about the size of a folded napkin. You slide in, knees pressed to his, back pressed to the wall, cozy, questionably comfortable. The rest of the family begins to gather. Your father sits with a sigh like a bellows deflating. Your sister sets the bread on the table, a flat, dense loaf with a suspicious dent. No one asks what made the dent. The dent is now part of dinner. You all bow your heads briefly, a quick prayer, short, humble, gratitude for warmth, food, and the fact that the thatch hasn't fallen in yet. Spoons in. The stew is hot, salty, and full of texture. A chunk of carrot surprises you with its competence. You chew slowly, savoring each bite. There's no rush. Every spoonful counts. Conversation begins in the way it always does, tentatively. Your brother mentions seeing a fox near the field. Your mother mutters that it better not be after the chickens again. Your father shares that the reeve said the manor chimney's clogged again, and the steward is blaming it on bad peasant smoke. You roll your eyes along with everyone else. Then the talk shifts to the weather, the upcoming planting, the neighbor who still owes your family a basket of apples from last harvest. You're not bitter about it. You're just not forgetting. And then comes the drama. Apparently, someone, no one will say who, was overheard telling the reeve that old Marga's goat is enchanted. The reason? It hasn't stopped bleeding since the new moon and recently bit a visiting friar. You try not to laugh, but your stew almost goes up your nose. Historians often point out how intertwined daily village life was with rumor, gossip, and superstition. When your entire world is small and survival-oriented, every story carries weight. A sick chicken could be bad luck or a curse. A successful cabbage harvest, maybe divine favor, or maybe the cabbage was just particularly enthusiastic. Tonight, the talk continues. Your cousin Giles finally returns, sliding in quietly with his ridiculous one-string lute. He strums it once. It makes a sound like a frog choking on a spoon. Everyone ignores it. He starts tuning it. Again. The cat, now nestled beside the hearth, gives him a look of ancient judgment. You pass the bread. It's dry, but it sops up stew like a champ. You chew and let the warmth settle in your limbs. The dog rests his chin on your foot. You don't move. One of the younger children begins recounting a tale he heard at the well. Something about a ghost that lives in the river and pulls socks off careless bathers. You nod solemnly. That explains everything, you say. Your brother kicks you gently under the table. Your mother asks how the fence repair went. You shrug and say, "It's up." Your father grunts approvingly. "That's good enough." The conversation drifts, as it always does, from news to nonsense to memories. Someone brings up the year the cow got into the ale barrel. Everyone laughs. The cow does not, though she shifts her weight in the stall just beyond the wall like she remembers and resents it. You sit back, bowl empty, and stare at the fire. This is one of the few times of day where you aren't doing anything. You aren't digging or hauling or mending. You're just being. A warm belly, a fire nearby, a room full of people who, despite the elbow wars and blanket theft, belong to you, and you to them. There's an art to this kind of quiet. It doesn't come easy in a life full of hard ground and harder work, but when it arrives, Even just for an hour, you savor it. The fire snaps softly. Your eyes begin to droop. And then, because every serf knows peace is temporary, someone notices a spoon is missing. Accusations fly. Jokes are made. A full 5 minutes of uproar follows until it's found under the dog, who has no comment. And with that, dinner winds down. Bowls are stacked, crumbs brushed aside. Someone begins cleaning while humming. Your cousin tries another note on the lute. It's worse than the first. You make eye contact with the cat. The cat blinks. Night is fully here now, and your day is winding down with it. The fire burns low now, casting the room in hues of soft amber and long shadows. Everyone moves slower, bellies full, bodies spent. The dog rolls over with a sigh that sounds vaguely judgmental. You've eaten, you've talked, you've survived another day. But sleep isn't immediate, not yet. There's still one more round of the evening ritual, winding down without the help of pillows, privacy, or peace. It starts with the stories. Someone always asks for one. Tonight, it's your youngest brother, already curled up under half the communal blanket like a turnip with eyes. He looks expectantly at your mother, who gives a theatrical groan but begins anyway. It's a tale you've heard 100 times, about a saint who outwitted the devil using only a loaf of barley bread and a particularly sarcastic goose. You could recite it in your sleep. You probably have. But you still listen because the words are familiar, the cadence is soft, and hearing them means the day is truly ending. Your cousin, emboldened by the lukewarm reception to his last lute note, offers a few strums. This time, it's a little better, almost musical, if you tilt your head and squint. He starts singing softly and off-key, a tune about planting seasons and lost love. Or maybe it's just about cabbage. Hard to tell. You lie on your back and stare at the rafters. They're coated in soot and cobwebs, crisscrossed with years of smoke and spider ambition. One beam has a crack shaped like a rabbit, or a really ambitious potato. You blink at it, letting your eyes unfocus. Nearby, someone whispers a prayer, not loud, not formal, just a few words sent upward in case something's listening. You whisper your own. It's not long, not fancy, just thanks. And maybe a quiet request that the cow not escape again this week. The conversation turns to strange dreams. Who had one? What it meant. Your brother describes one about flying pigs. You point toward Wilfred and suggest he's just forecasting. Your sister mentions she dreamed she found gold in the garden. Everyone sighs. That one again. The dream of easy fortune. But she swears it felt real. Maybe it's a sign, she says. Maybe it means we'll have a good harvest. No one laughs. Not because they believe her, but because they want to. Historians sometimes debate the role of faith and dreams in medieval village life. Some frame it as superstition, others as survival. For you, it's a little of both. When life is cold, hard, and endlessly repetitive, meaning doesn't always come from the priest or the parish. Sometimes it comes from cabbages that look like faces, or dreams of buried treasure under the turnips. You shift under the blanket, finding a comfortable position between the dog and your sister's elbow. You think about your field again, your real one, the one you actually get to keep. You wonder if the onion shoot survived the frost. You hope the mustard greens didn't bolt. Then someone starts humming. It's not a song, you know, just a little tune, low and meandering, like a lullaby that forgot it had words. You hum along quietly. The others join in, just breath and sound. The fire pops once. Outside, the wind has picked up, whistling against the shutter, rustling the thatch like an old hand stirring straw. You pull the blanket closer and curl onto your side. The dog has stolen most of the warmth. The cat has stolen your spot by the fire. Your toes are freezing and someone's knee is very pointed. But it's okay, because this is what the end of the day looks like. No fanfare, no velvet pillows, just shared space, sore muscles, and the quiet promise that the world didn't win today. Not entirely. Someone makes one last joke, a pun about ducks. It's terrible. Everyone groans, and then stillness, not silence, never silence. There's always a cough, a sigh, the creak of the roof beams, but the kind of stillness that means no more movement, no more chores, just rest. You exhale and let your muscles sink into the mattress, if straw and woven sacks count as a mattress. You stretch your legs until your feet touch someone else's. They kick you. You both pretend it didn't happen. The fire dies lower, the light fades, and slowly, one by one, the voices drift into quiet breathing. Except Giles. He tries one more lute note. It's awful. You throw a slipper at him. Then all is still. Sleep doesn't come immediately, not with the wind hissing through the thatch and the goat outside making noises that sound suspiciously like medieval jazz. You lie there in the dark, wedged between your sister's knees in the wall, feeling the straw mat crinkle beneath you and the ache in your back spread out like a map. You close your eyes, determined to drift off. But of course, that's when your brain remembers every single discomfort at once. Your left elbow is resting on something suspiciously sharp, possibly a forgotten spoon, possibly your own sense of dignity. You shift slightly, earning a half-hearted groan from your brother, and try to ignore the fact that your toes are somehow simultaneously frozen and sweaty. A medieval paradox. The fire has settled now, coals glowing faintly, casting soft shadows that stretch along the wall like sleepy fingers. The room is mostly quiet. Someone snores. You suspect your father or the dog. The two have eerily similar acoustics. The roof creaks. A drip from yesterday's rain plinks softly into a wooden bowl placed under the leak. A steady rhythm you've grown used to, like a slightly annoying lullaby. One of your siblings shifts, and the blanket, which was sort of equally distributed, is now mostly his. You tug it back. A silent war begins, all knees and elbows beneath wool. You think of your day, not just the chores, but the little moments in between. The warm bite of turnip stew, the smile Bram gave when the fence held, the bird that watched you from the hedgerow like it was judging your hoeing technique. Maybe it was. Maybe it's the same bird every day, and you're just part of its daily routine. Your eyes flutter closed for a moment, then open again. Because, of course, now you remember something important. You didn't bring in the laundry. The shift from half asleep to fully awake is instant. You sit up slowly, careful not to disturb the others. You step over the snoring dog, past the bowl under the leak, and quietly unlatch the door. Outside, the night air slaps you gently, cold, crisp, and carrying the scent of wood smoke and damp hay. You cross to the line, where 3 shirts and 1 sock sway slightly in the breeze. You grab them quickly, cold fabric brushing your skin like judgment, and duck back inside. You hang them on the hooks by the hearth where they'll dry, or at least freeze slightly slower. You press your hand to the coals, soaking in a bit of their fading warmth before crawling back to your place. Naturally, someone has stolen your spot. You sigh and wedge yourself into the remaining 6 inches of blanket territory, curling tightly and muttering, "This is fine. I love sleeping with 1 foot in the air." Eventually, your body starts to settle again. Your mind slows. You listen to the familiar chorus of sleeping sounds, of the wind brushing the shutters, of the dog twitching in some dream where he finally catches that chicken. Historians might write about your life in numbers: days worked, crops harvested, duties owed. But they won't write about this part, the part where you're half awake in a room full of people you know better than you know yourself, counting the seconds between drips and wondering if anyone else also dreams in cabbage metaphors. Your breathing slows. You think of the field again, yours, your own little crooked slice of earth. You picture the onion shoots, the stubborn cabbage, the rock you keep meaning to dig out, but now sort of respect. You smile slightly in the dark, because even in the smallness of this life, there's something whole in it, something worth waking up for, even if it's just to move a goat or retrieve socks. Outside, the stars are somewhere above the clouds, hidden, but there. You close your eyes again, and this time, sleep follows without protest. You don't dream of kings or castles or grand quests. You dream of onions. Not just any onions, your onions. Row upon a slightly crooked row of them, swaying gently under a blue sky that doesn't exist in a real life, but feels just familiar enough to fool you. They're enormous, glossy, practically glowing. You reach for one and, naturally, wake up just before you can pick it. Your eyes open slowly, still dark, still quiet, still warm, in that too many bodies in a small room way. Someone's foot is nestled against your shin. You pray. It's family. The roof creaks again, softer this time. Walter, the beam you named, groans in sympathy. The drip into the bowl has stopped, either because the leak has frozen or because someone knocked the bowl over. You can't tell, and you're not about to check. You roll onto your back and stare at the ceiling. There's comfort in knowing you'll fall asleep again soon. You always do. But in this liminal space between wake and sleep, your mind drifts. You think of the year it snowed so early you couldn't even finish harvesting your leeks, of how everyone shared their stores without being asked, of how the dog wore a cloak made from an old tunic and trotted around like he was mayor. You remember your uncle's wedding, a muddy affair with too much ale and a lute string that snapped mid-song. The guests sang anyway, loud and off-key and full of joy. You remember the bread still warm from the fire and the stew that had actual meat in it. Luxury. You think of your first time plowing a field, how you held the handles too tightly and walked crooked the rest of the week. How proud you felt even with blisters the size of coins. How you named the ox after yourself, thinking it was noble. The ox didn't agree. Historians often miss these parts, the ones not recorded in manorial rolls or parish logs, the little stories, the accidental smiles, the borrowed boots, and the shared curses when it rains 3 days straight. But that's the real tapestry of life here, isn't it? You don't measure time in years. You measure it in harvests, in how many times you patch the same pair of trousers, in how long it takes for the calluses to return after winter. The life of a serf isn't one of comfort, but it is one of pattern, of rhythm, of simple repetition with tiny variables, weather, gossip, the angle of the sun as you weed your plot. That's what keeps you going, that and the stew. Your thoughts are gently interrupted by the soft thunk of something falling near the hearth. You turn your head and spot Giles, half asleep, trying to hang his lute on a nail that doesn't exist. He blinks at the wall, then curls up beside it and begins snoring. The lute leans against his shoulder like it, too, has given up. You smile in the dark, just a little. Eventually, sleep does return, slower this time, but deeper. You sink into the warmth of the shared blanket, feel the shape of the cottage around you, familiar and crooked and home. The fire glows dimly. A few coals shift. The wind sighs along the shutter. You drift off thinking of the morning to come, of chores, yes, but also of the moment when you step into your field and see what lived through the night. You picture one tiny onion poking through with defiance, declaring, "Yes, I'm still here, and you will be too." The light wakes you before the rooster does, which, frankly, feels like a small miracle. It slips in through the shutter, pale and hesitant, stretching across the cottage floor like it's asking permission to enter. You lie there for a moment, soaking it in, aware that your arm has fallen asleep, and so has your left foot. But somehow, you're okay with that. The rest of the house begins to stir slowly, in waves. A cough here, a stretch there, someone muttering something about dreams and cabbages again. You hear the clink of wood as your father moves to stoke the fire, his steps practiced and quiet. You don't even open your eyes, because it's not quite time yet. Not until the rooster lets loose his dramatic announcement of morning, which he does a heartbeat later, with all the theatrical gusto of someone who believes the world revolves around him. There it is, the cue. You open your eyes and blink up at the same cracked rafters, the same drift of smoke that always lingers from the hearth, and the familiar blur of your cousin's hair smooshed against a sack of grain. The dog yawns next to you, tongue lolling, tail thumping lazily. You sit up, groaning quietly, stretching your arms overhead until your spine responds with 3 distinct pops and a quiet whimper. Your blanket falls to your waist, revealing the crumpled tunic you slept in and the sock that somehow ended up halfway off. You fix neither. Not yet. You glance at the hearth. The fire is back, dancing again. The pot is already simmering, its bubbling sound promising warmth, even if the contents are likely the same barley mush as yesterday and the day before. Still, you're grateful. Your mother hands you a bowl wordlessly, and you take it, letting the heat warm your fingers. You sip slowly. The taste is familiar, plain, and oddly comforting, like chewing on a memory that's never quite sweet, but never fully bitter. Outside, you can hear the village stretching awake, doors opening, hens clucking, someone cursing at a stubborn latch. You know the pattern by now. You could recite it in your sleep. The tasks ahead wait patiently. The fence likely blew sideways again. The cow probably needs coaxing, the onions in your patch will want checking, and the reeve will definitely be yelling about something before noon. And still, you smile, because you made it through another day, another cycle, another evening of shared soup and shared silence, and the minor miracle of sleep in a house with 12 moving limbs and only one decent blanket. You rise, finally, feet finding the cold floor. The morning air nips at your skin like it always does. You dress with slow hands. Wrap your belt. Grab your boots. Outside, the sky is the color of fresh milk, pale, endless, full of possibilities that mostly involve mud. You step out, boots crunching on frost-tinged earth. Your breath fogs in front of you like a question you don't have to answer yet. You start toward the field where the turnips may have turned out, or the cabbage may have grown teeth, or the same stubborn rock may still be waiting. You'll find out soon enough. The rooster crows again, the pig grunts, and you keep walking, because that's what you do, because that's what life is. And now, the tools are put away, the fire has dimmed, and your breath has softened with the quiet of the evening. The field sleeps outside, hushed beneath a blanket of fog, and the cottage is full of that end-of-day stillness where even the wind seems to tread lightly. You've done what you could today. The fence mostly stands. The animals are fed. The stew held just enough flavor to make the second bowl worth it. And your little plot, crooked, humble, hopeful, waits patiently for whatever tomorrow brings. The ache in your shoulders? That's proof of effort. The mud on your boots? That's the price of roots. And the heaviness behind your eyes now? That's the softness of well-earned rest. There is no grand reward, no applause, no shining coin for what you've done. But there is warmth, there is stillness, and there is the comfort of knowing you played your part in the rhythm of the land. The fire hums low beside you now, and outside the stars begin to blink into place. You don't need to see them to know they're there. Just like the field, just like the seasons, just like tomorrow. So take one last breath. Let your body settle, heavy and warm. Let your thoughts wander. Let the rhythm of this old world cradle you. You are safe. You are enough. You can rest now.